Now the defenders of the stronghold of democracy and of equal opportunity.
You and I, as citizens, have the obligation to shape the debates of our time, not only with the votes we cast, but with the voices we lift.
The people are looking for honest answers, not easy answers.
The very word secrecy is repugnant.
Clear leadership.
And we are, as a people,
not false claims and evasiveness and politics as usual.
Opposed to secret societies.
As a people, we cannot afford to let any group of citizens or any individual citizen live or labor under conditions which are injurious to the Commonwealth.
Black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American, young, old, gay, straight, men, women, folks with disabilities, all pledging allegiance under the same proud flag to this big, bold country that we love. That's what I see. That's the America I know.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America.
Welcome to the Aggressive Progressive Podcast. I am your host, Chris Hahn. I'm at Christopher Hahn on X, Christopher Hahn NY on Instagram, and ChristopherHahn.com. Those are my socials. You know, there are certain things that no president should do. Defying court orders is one of them. Let's talk about it. There are some things that you don't expect to happen in a society that prides itself on law and order. Defying a judicial order is one of those things. Now, we could mince words about whether the order was defied or not. The point of the matter is that the judge issued a very specific order that these, quote, gang members should not have been deported in the way they had to El Salvador at that point in time, because there was a legal question about whether or not the president had the right to do that. The president pretended they didn't receive the order and deported them anyway. I don't want to get into whether or not these men were gang members, whether they were violent threats to the United States of America, whether the act that the president is using, which by the way is a very old act, it dates back to Adams, the Adams administration. You might have heard of him. He was the second president of the United States right after Washington. I don't think we need to get into it. What I do think is that the judge said stop, and judges do have the right to say stop. And in a society where there are checks and balances, the president of the United States or the Congress, as the case may be, needs to respect the rule of the judge. That doesn't mean that the president couldn't appeal it. He couldn't ask Congress for relief if there was some law that needed to be passed. But the president needs to abide by the judicial ruling. Do I want to see gang members who are here, who are not citizens, removed from the country? Of course I do. Violence, crime, nobody wants any of that. But here's what I like to always remind people about rights. We believe as Americans that rights are endowed by the Creator. We believe that everyone on this planet is entitled to inalienable rights. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, right? We believe that. This is a country that actually abides by that, gives people who happen to be here those rights. Citizens, of course, but anyone who happens to come into this country does have rights of due process. Whether you think they are good people or bad people is irrelevant. That is for the process to figure out. That is for the due process of law to figure out, whether it's before a jury or of their peers or through other panels like judicial panels. But it is not for one person who happens to be the president of the United States to unilaterally decide who has these rights and who does not. The Declaration of of Independence is very clear in what it says. And again, the Declaration doesn't have any binding legal authority, but it is one of our founding documents. And it doesn't say that, all men are created equal and endowed with inalienable rights that include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It doesn't say all men born in the United States. It says all. And it says it's endowed by the Creator, who is God. It is not Donald Trump. It is not Congress. It is not even the Constitution. The Constitution memorializes those rights and protects us with those rights here in the United States of America. But it's enshrining rights that our founders believed we all were born with and that were given to us by God. So I believe in due process of law. I do not believe that the president or anybody who works for the president can just decide unilaterally that these people do not have rights. Call me crazy. But I always thought that was the American way, that we believe in the due process of law, that we believe that it is better for guilty people to go free than for one innocent person to go to jail. That's how I was raised. That was the law I studied. Doesn't seem to be the case anymore. No, let's take a dragnet. Let's have this guy, Tom Holland, go running around and busting down doors. And let's have a Homeland Security secretary who likes to dress up like she's going on raids. Let's do all this nonsense. For what? What does that say? What does that make us? I'll tell you what, it makes us into something we're not going to recognize if we keep it up. And it's not going to be good for any of us long term. You think this is good for you? You're wrong. It is not good for you. It is good for no one. I am your host, Chris Hahn. I'm at Christopher Hahn on X, Christopher Hahn NY on Instagram, and ChristopherHahn.com. If you're not already watching me on YouTube, it's at The Aggressive Progressive on YouTube. And the Aggressive Progressive podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. So check those out. And of course, watch me on News Nation. I'm on there all the time. And I'm here and I'm talking to you. And I'm hoping that I'm making you think a little bit, right? I know that a lot of people know me from conservative media. And some of you listen to me because you agree with my politics. Some of you say, oh, that's the guy I've seen on Fox and other places. So let me check out what he has to say. I hope that intellectual curiosity is not lost in this country and has not just become another thing that if we're not hearing from somebody who's wearing our jersey, we don't care what they say. And I'm starting to feel that in politics, that seems to be, par for the course, right? Like myself and Donald Trump can say the exact same thing. If I say it, you hate it if you're a Trumper. And if he says it, you think it's the greatest thing that was ever said by anyone ever. All this talk in the media about how Democratic popularity is down and down and down. Oh, Democratic popularity is down. Democrats are very critical of themselves. And if you look inside the numbers, 40% of Democrats are not approving of the Democratic Party. Okay, so just 40% of people who say they are registered Democrats are not approving of the Democratic Party. Now, we're not talking about the Republican number, which is actually 36%. Democratic numbers, 29%. Republican numbers, 36%. On a question like that, that can basically be a tie, margin of error-wise, right? But Republicans overwhelmingly support Republican policies, right? So the 36%, it's almost 100% of Republicans. And then they're getting virtually none of anybody else. Okay. So just keep that in mind, right? Democrats fall in love. Republicans fall in line. And look, I know that there's a lot of, back and forth in the Democratic Party right now about what direction we should be taking and how to rally. And I know I've been talking about that a lot. But I, again, want to remind every single person watching me that politics is a pendulum. And one thing I know about pendulums, they are always in motion. So, yes, Donald Trump took the pendulum at its peak this year. Took him at the peak this year, and they appear to be very powerful. And there's some Democrats crying, saying, we're never going to get power back. But I know this about pendulums. They usually swing, and they're rarely swinging in the same direction. They're going back and forth. And right now, that pendulum is starting to swing back and away from Republicans. Does that mean it's for Democrats? No, but it's away from Republicans, away from Trump. And all this Democratic Party stinks talk will not be the same. It's funny. All the news media is comparing the Democratic number from 2021. They're not comparing the Democratic number to the Republican number in 2021. Because when Joe Biden took office in 2021, opinion of the Republican Party was basically 25% in this country. Okay? 25% of people approved of Republicans. Right? So we're basically where they were at the same time 4 years ago. But nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to put it in that perspective. Pendulums swing. It will swing again. I am telling you right now, and I've been saying this, if you've been listening to me on either my podcast or my radio show, or you've seen me on TV, or you're watching me on YouTube, I have been very clear that I believe that 2026 is going to be a good year for Democrats. I'm going to tell you right now, I think 2025, which are mostly local elections in the United States of America, are going to be good years for Democrats. There are 2 statewide elections, right? Governor of Virginia and New Jersey. Watch what happens there. The state houses are up for grabs. Watch what happens there. Pendulums swing. Do I think that the American people like chaos? No, I do not believe they do. Do I think they like, the rejection of checks and balances? I do not think the American people like that. In fact, the American people are going to send messages. They may even send the message in a special election. We've been talking about that a lot. But they love to send messages. Stay within the traditions and the parameters that we all expect presidents and Congress and governors and senators and judges to abide. Stay within those parameters. And the American people have a funny way of putting up guardrails for administrations that overreach. And I'm telling you right now, if you look up overreach in the dictionary, the first 2 months of the Trump administration will be example number 1. It has been the overreach of overreaches. And now denying judicial orders, I don't see how that works out. And by the way, again, everything he does is to distract you from what actually matters to you. The crumbling economy is not in the A blocks of most TV news programs today because they're talking about the judicial order, as did I. But the economy is impacting every single American. And they are not going to like it. And by the way, they'll feel it themselves. They don't need to be told. Keep an eye. Pendulum is swinging. We should all be happy it does. And thank God it does. Right? It is what has kept this country stable for over 200 years. We've had a stable economy. We've had stable governments because the American people maybe get exuberance about a particular candidate and vote in all of the people on that party's line. They almost always overreach. And then the American people say, not so fast, and they push it back. When Barack Obama got elected president in 2008, he had 60 senators and an overwhelming majority in the House of Representatives. 2 years later, that was all gone. And the Republicans controlled the House and the Senate. Barack Obama got reelected. Just remember, that's the pendulum doing its work. All right, I'm going to remind you now, as I always do, to seek the truth. Question everyone and everything, even me. Seek the truth. I know it's out there, and I know you'll find it if you look for it. And I'll be back here again real soon to tell you the truth as I see it. I'm Chris Hahn. Thanks for joining me on the Aggressive Progressive Podcast.